I'll tell you why it's a must win for the Jags on Sunday against the lowly Houston Texans. Must win? Yep. I'll explain that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I am Tony Wiggins. This is Locked On Jaguars, a special weekend edition of Locked On Jaguars. And we thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. And it is your team every day. That's why you're here every single day. The host of Locked On Jaguars. Been covering this team for about 13, 14 years now. This podcast is free on all platforms. I just want to make sure you know we don't charge you for this content. Make sure you like and subscribe everywhere you get your podcasts, especially on the YouTube page. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. Always eternally grateful for you. I'm going to talk about why this is a must-win game that they play against the Houston Texans. And I know half of y'all probably think I'm crazy for thinking that it's a must-win game 5 weeks into the season, when they're 2-2, sitting on top of the AFC South. But I got a different little bit of mindset as to why this is a must-win situation. I'll tell you about that. I'm also going to tell you what they have to do to win and what they have to avoid if they want to win. I'll do that in segment 2. Segment 3, I'm going to talk about game planning and play calling. And I'm going to tell you why I like the way Doug Peterson sort of responds after the losses when folks say, well, you didn't do this enough, you didn't do that enough. Preferably, I'm really talking about the running game. You didn't do this enough, you didn't. Why didn't you do this? Or do you have any regrets? And he always stands 10 toes down and says, you don't have none. And I'm going to tell you why I agree with that. But first and foremost, must-win game against the Houston Texans, who are at the doormat, at the bottom, if you will, of the AFC South. We know a little bit about that because that's where the Jaguars typically have been over the years. I'm going to turn my light on here. But now they found themselves, the Jaguars, they found themselves on top, the cream of the crop in the AFC South. And you don't want to go back. In fact, as I said earlier this week, you want to send a message that there's a clear line of demarcation that separates you from those who now dwell where you used to be, right? If you're a Jaguars fan. Yeah. You don't want to be hanging around, letting them hang around and letting them come in here and so people can go, oh, y'all pretenders. I knew it was the same old Jacksonville. Y'all can't beat Houston. And there's no difference between the top and the bottom. And the only reason you guys are where you are right now is because the division is so horrible. You know that's coming, right? Even if the Jaguars win and improve and get better and have a really nice record this year, they're going to say, well, they played a crappy division. They wouldn't necessarily be telling a lie when they say that, because one of the reasons I picked the Jaguars to win the division is because it's a crappy division. And the Jaguars have improved. And I think the door and the window of opportunity for some people in the division, namely the Colts, and we'll see about the Titans, I think it's closing. Those two teams have been teams, especially the Titans. The Titans went to the AFC Championship game a couple of years ago, but they didn't win it. And they're getting old in some spots, right? And they're banged up. And they still have Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. The Colts can't get right. And Houston is a debacle. They're the Oklahoma City Thunder of the NFL. They got all of these draft picks that's later that they hope they can turn into something. But right now, they're just bad. They're bad. They're worse than they were last year, and that shocks me that they're not as good a team as they were just a year ago. So they swept the Jaguars last year, so that's something that you have to be weary of. But the Jaguars are a better team now than they were last year in a bunch of different ways. It's a must-win game, though. It's a must win. You have to be able to go out and beat teams that you are better than. In this league, that is a requirement. There are some teams that should not even have a chance when they come out of the tunnel if you are going to be what they consider a good team, one of the top, at least in the top half of the league. There's some bottom dwellers here that you have to beat them. Basically, what I'm telling you is this. I feel about Houston the way teams felt about Jacksonville the last 3 years, and the way they felt about Jacksonville about 8 of the last 10 years is that it's Jacksonville, right? Okay, this is Houston. This is a walk in the park. I'm not saying that it's not difficult or that those guys are NFL players too, right? Like most of them are college All-Americans or something, and they put their pants on just like everybody else. Sort of the same thing I was saying at the Jaguars when I was talking about them going out to play the Chargers and going up to play the Eagles. But come on, man, there's a difference. Like when you're like really, really bad, most teams feel like you don't stand a chance. That you can game up and you can be brave. Last year, the Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Buffalo Bills, and the Jaguars were epically horrible last year, right? Ended up with the number 1 pick, but they beat a team that is now favored to go to the Super Bowl. So I know anything can happen, but we just can't let it happen here. We can't let it happen to us. We can't let it happen tomorrow. Segment 2 is on the way. I am going to tell you exactly how the Jaguars need to play, what they need to do in order to win the game tomorrow, who needs to play well, what has to happen in order for the Jaguars to be successful tomorrow. It's probably a little bit more simple than one would think it is. It's probably not exactly what you think it is. I'm going to tell you what it is. Put it this way, I'm going to tease you, but I'm going to give you a hint. They just got to be who they are. They got to be who they think they are. It's me versus me. I'll tell you more about that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Simply safe. Simply safe. All right, here's a sports analogy for you. When it comes to burglars, your home is like the end zone, right? And you need the absolute strongest defense you can muster. This is why I use and trust Simply Safe Home Security. At Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters. It's cutting-edge technology, powered 24/7 by professional monitoring agents who always have your back, so you always know your home is safe. I had it installed for my son in his brand new, big, beautiful home on the lake because even though he's a grown man, I want him to feel safe 100% of the time, all the time. Therefore, I feel safe knowing that he's okay. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL. Save 20% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. There's no safe like Simply Safe. And there's no place like Locked On Jaguars, your first listen. We thank you for making us your first listen. And you are safe with us here on your daily Jacksonville Jaguars show because it's your team every day. It's not every day, and it hasn't been every day that the Jaguars have been a considerable favorite over anybody, let alone a divisional opponent. But they are, and they will be favorite tomorrow against the Houston Texans. Are you scared yet? Has it sunk in yet? What if they lose? And I'm only saying this so you'll understand why I say this is a must-win game and why I feel so compelled to label it that way. What if they lose? You know how you're going to feel tomorrow if they don't win at 4 o'clock? At 4 p.m. on Sunday, you know how bad you'll feel? Do you know how you feel when everybody goes, told you, y'all ain't changed? What does Trevor Lawrence, if he has a bad game for the second week in a row, what does he say at the press conference? What does he say Monday when he addresses the players? What do they say that makes you feel as good as you feel today about the team and the prospects? You see now, if they lose to Houston, like a whole bunch of people weren't mad that they lost to Philly. But if you lose to Houston and give them their first win and give them life and breathe life into them, and then you fall under 500, this was going to sting worse. It's going to hurt. That's why I think it's a must-win game. It's a must-win game because it's one you're supposed to get. And wins don't come easy in the National Football League. So the ones that should be easy, you got to take them. You absolutely have to take them. How do they get there, though? What do they do? I'll tell you what they got to do. They got to be themselves. It's me versus me. If you're the Jacksonville Jaguars and you are just flat out better than Houston, keep it simple. KISS. Keep it simple, silly. Here's what you got to do. Me versus me. Don't beat yourself. Go out, play as hard as you can, focus on you, and they can't stop you. Execute everything. Block, tackle. Me versus me. No dumb penalties. Me versus me. Be yourself. Follow the game plan. Trust your coaches. Trust each other. Do your job. Tackle in open spaces. Get off the field on third down. Get ahead. Play with the lead. Get to your sub packages. Me versus me. Even in the games that they lost, and we'll give Philly credit because they're a really good team, and we could talk about the elements in the rain, and it's the opening game in Washington, and you blew some opportunities. You go back in those games, and if the Jaguars check themselves and play better in certain situations, don't miss tackles, don't fumble the ball, Trevor, don't overthrow people in the game one, Trevor, execute, don't drop the ball, ETN, on the goal line on fourth down, execute, it's you versus you. One of the worst things and one of the worst feelings that you can have, not just even in athletics, is when you don't get the result that you were hoping to get. And by not getting the result you hope to get, you look back with regret and realize you actually did a lot of things to hinder yourself getting that said result. So yeah, it's me versus me. The Jaguars have to be their best version of themselves. That means stopping the run, limit your negative plays, so the down and distance is not long, no drops, tackle in open spaces, especially on the second level, communication in the defensive backfield, no easy points for Houston, kicking game, physicality, no dumb penalties, and they should be fine. Really simple. I mean, they could win the game tomorrow 23-17. The score might make the game look closer, but they can win it convincingly without the score actually making it look like they were ever in danger of losing. You feel what I'm saying? It's like Philly beat the Jaguars by 8, but somehow in the second half, you never really felt like Philly was in trouble of losing the game. And the Jaguars can do that exact same thing on tomorrow or this Sunday against Houston. Stopping Damian Pierce, making sure you hassle Davis Mills to death. Don't let Brandon Cooks beat you deep. And I heard he ain't in the mood to be beating people deep anyway because he's not playing that well this year. Just don't allow Houston to come in here and get their comeuppance on you. Don't allow Houston to come into Jacksonville. Don't be what we used to say in the past. Don't be the elixir that cures somebody who's ailing. Too many times the Jaguars were the elixir, the antibiotic to every team that had some sort of winning disease. You can't do that now. You have to, in the words of somebody else, go get your stuff from somebody else. You ain't taking it from me. Don't give them my, and that's what the Jaguars have to do. The Jaguars really, really have to come out tomorrow with a me versus me attitude and ensure victory by being sound, being fundamental, no tricks or any of that stuff. Speaking of tricks, a lot of people think calling plays is all about fooling people, that calling plays and making halftime adjustments, like when your team plays better, like the coach went in and did some sort of halftime adjustment. I want to talk about all that with Doug Peterson because there's a lot of conversation going on about whenever they lose, it's always, why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? I'm going to tell you all about it, and I'm going to tell you why I disagree with that line of thinking, and I'll do it in just a second. here in segment 3 on Locked On Jaguars after I let you know about BetOnline.net, our sponsor for today's show. They're your number one source for your football betting info this season. Please do not downplay the type of information you can get at betonline.net before you actually make your wagers. They can give you everything about player developments, team matchups, all the news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sport wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite games and events, including baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the betonline.net website or use your mobile device to learn more today because BetOnline is where the game starts. And y'all start here with your boy, T-Wig, every single day, making us your first listen, and we appreciate you doing that. Always making us your first listen. But now I'll give you something else to listen to. Make sure you check out the NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL. Locked On's local experts give you the inside scoop on the 5 biggest games of the NFL weekend, including Sunday and Monday Night Football. Plus, betting advice from the field's leading experts at BetOnline. Follow NFL Key Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. All right, let's break it down about Doug Peterson. After every loss, folks like to point to and say, that's on Doug. Should have done this. Should have ran the ball more. Should have done this. And each and every week, now I didn't talk to him this week, but each and every week, Doug Peterson stands up and says the same thing. We had a plan. We went with the plan. So if you wake up tomorrow and you say they should have run James Robinson more, why didn't they do it? It was raining. Like last week, it was like it was raining. This is a perfect game. You weren't blown out of the game. It's a perfect game to get James Robinson some more carries. You can be upset by what they chose to do. I don't have a problem with that because everybody has an opinion. But too many times I hear it and it comes across as if you're upset because he got in the game, and I think folks think he got away from something, like he's caught up in the game. And I think people believe that he made these decisions as a play caller during the game, right? And it downplays what actually happens during the week. During the week, they scour through tape. They watch every snap. They watch all 22. They watch it from the eye in the sky. They have a plan of attack based on what they see these dudes do well and what they see that they don't do well, or what they failed to do in the past. They come up with ways that they know they're going to challenge that team. It may be things that you don't agree with, but mind you, you're making that disagreement without the benefit of the film study that they do. You're making it somewhat emotionally, and then you're making it based on what you think, and you're also usually making that decision based on what worked and what didn't. So you say, well, they should have done the other thing, without thinking it through, saying you either trust your coach or you don't. If they studied all week collectively, all of them together, and they come up with a game plan, and this is really where Press Taylor comes into play. They come up with a game plan. It's based on what they saw on tape, what their players' capabilities are, what they ask their guys to do, what plays into their guys' strength, as I almost killed myself hitting my microphone. They really, really, really build these game plans based on that information. So sometimes I think when we ask these questions like, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? The question should almost be framed this way. What did you see, and why did you come into the game with this plan to do this or do that? And I believe it's that way, as opposed to a coach getting into the game and getting caught up. Like, I forgot about James Robinson, or I forgot about this guy. James Robinson at one point, he averaged 3.6 yards a carry against the Eagles. He had a 9-yard run. Take the 9-yard run away, he averaged like 3 yards a carry. And everyone was going berserk as if the dude was averaging 7.8 yards a carry and they should have given him the ball more. Maybe the plan coming into the game was, I don't think we can block them consistently all game because their front is really, really strong. And Fletcher Cox is a mean SOB, and he's going to give fits to whoever he lines up in front of, whether it be Luke Fortner or Ben Barch. And I don't want to run that way. And I don't want to run sideways because their lateral quickness is too good. We need to attack them here. They're missing a corner. We need to tackle them here. Maybe we saw something on tape where they did. Maybe we watched the Vikings game when they played them and they did this and they didn't do this very well. And we don't want to put guys into this situation. I got this novel idea, right? Instead of questioning the game plan, instead of saying, well, you had a bad day calling the game, instead of assuming when they win games where they're down at halftime or they're not playing well, and then all of a sudden they come out in the third quarter and they play really, really well. Because that's what we did against Washington. And I remember somebody asked the question that day. They were losing 14-3 to Washington, and then they came out and they took the lead 21 or 22-14 or something like that. And someone asked the question about halftime adjustments. Somebody said, what do you say to them? Doug said, nothing really. They just came out and played better. They knew that they hadn't played as well. And my eyes lit up and I felt like I caught on fire because I have been waiting for someone to say, it is so cliche to talk about halftime adjustments. Not all the time do you see an adjustment, right? You know what you see? Execution. People playing better. People doing their job. That's what you see. Because I want to know, how do you adjust to tell your quarterback to stop fumbling? He just got to stop doing it. Somebody said, well, you run the ball to James Robinson, your quarterback doesn't fumble. Wrong answer. You don't not throw so your quarterback doesn't fumble. Why is he even out there if that's what you're going to do? That, in my opinion, would be changing your game plan based on what's going on. The game plan coming into, I guarantee you, whatever game plan he had when he came into the Eagles game is the one that they knew when they got on the plane Friday or Saturday that that's what they were going to do. It had nothing to do with the way the game went. And I think sometimes fans get angry and think that what they see is based on the action that's going on right then and right there. And I think you do a disservice to the people who prepare the game plan because you think they're actually reacting to what they're seeing on the field. The only time I think coaches react to what happens on the field is when somebody gets hurt and when somebody gets hurt or somebody gets hot. When somebody gets hurt, somebody gets hot. And what I mean by hot is when you see that a person can't guard somebody, when somebody is clicking and the other person isn't playing well, or when there's an injury on your team and you have to adjust and base your game plan based on the personnel you have available, or when there's an injury on the other team, and let's just say somebody loses their top two corners. You challenge them. How many times have y'all seen a corner or a safety come out with injury and the team goes right at the guy who's a backup? You know why? Because they saw on tape that he's like that. He's like the little gazelle who's limping, and you're the lion. That's the one I'm going after. That's the weakling right there. That is even in the game plan because I'm sure that they go, you know what? If they go to this or go to that, or that kid gets on the field, if we ever get him on the field, we're going to attack him. It's all predetermined, y'all. It's all predetermined. So hopefully they have a good game plan tomorrow against the Houston Texans and they win the game. You got a good game plan here with me, making us your first listen. I'll make your next listen, the Peacock and Williamson NFL show here on the Locked On Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcast. It's a great show, man. Brian Peacock is the truth. And my man Matt Williams is a former NFL scout. He happens to be the truth also. but they give it to you in a very unique way that you cannot get anywhere else. So make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Enjoy the game. I'll do a postcast on Sunday. Make sure you lock in to Locked On. Until then, take care. I'm Tony Wiggins.